You can see our consultants. We had Arnold and O'Sheridan. We had an interior design consultant. We had a site civil consultant. So we had a site survey. We did a site plan, but this isn't a good site plan because our site civil consultant did a whole bunch of drawings that I don't have copies of because they came from them. They weren't generated by me. So then I've got a sheet that's symbol legend, abbreviations, and codes. So this shows like where my exitings are, where my fire stairs are, where the fire rated walls are. And I've got a little box for code information. I'm just kind of giving you background. I don't expect all this on a capstone project. So here's my plan. It's at an 1/8 inch scale. You can see the structural grids. Notice there's no furniture or anything shown. There's a built-in reception desk. That's about it. You can see I bubbled out my stairs and my bathrooms and my elevator, the things that, and the reception desk. So the things that are complicated, I bubbled all them out. And just because this is my floor plan sheet, if I've got details, like say there's a detail where this column is at the front entrance where we had a stone wrapper on the structural column, you don't have to like put all your details on one sheet. If you have space on your floor plan sheet and there's a related detail, it makes it easier for them. They don't have to switch the page. It's like, oh, that detail's right there. I don't even have to switch the page. So there's my second floor plan. So we had this, I don't know how we did it, to be honest with you. It's 13 years ago and I forgot about it. But we had this plug into Revit that you would type in your keynotes and it would automatically show up on the plan. So if you had a keynote, I'll show you this, how this works in the detail. So I have general plan notes, but then I also had this keynote system. So rather than having all this word on the plan, you looked at this keynote and then you looked up at the legend. So that's the way we rolled on that. I'm not sure if they still did that or if that was a one-time thing. So again, here's my third floor plan. You'll notice my dimensioning is to the face of stud, just like I teach you guys. So I'm using 3 5/8 inch metal studs. I've got some weird dimensions like 15/16. It's just the way it works out, right? You know, my outside grid dimensions are pretty logical. They're 130, 58.4, 34, 10 feet, all that. Those are my bumps out. My grid dimensions don't have fractions of an inch except for that goofy one. And don't ask me to remember why that happened. So then I've just got a regular roof plan. This is not a roof framing plan. So we had a standing seam metal roof and I had to show like where the flashing, where it was, where the lightning protection was, where the ridge vents were, where, you know, a standing seam metal, you remember the snow flies out. So I had to show the snow grids that hold all that up. And then we had a built-in gutter and downspout on that. So you can see some of the plans, I didn't have any logical details to put on here. Here's my reflected ceiling plans. And then I've got the details for like the soffits around their conference room done there. Another reflected ceiling plan for each level. So let's keep rolling here. Little reflected ceiling pan symbol key. So here's my furniture plan on the first floor. So you'll notice, like if I would have tried to show all this furniture on the main plan, there's no way it was going to happen. I couldn't read my dimensions. It would be just too much. So, you know, these are just open office system furniture. So that's shown on, and I'll show you this on Revit here. If you go back and look at my furniture and finish plan, this stuff isn't in there in 3D. So let me just show you how this looks. So if I go in here and I put a camera in here, so let's look at this break room. It's just a 2D CAD on the floor, right? Because for working drawings, I'm not going to do renderings of all these rooms. So I've just got a 2D CAD symbol that I just, or like it's maybe it wasn't done in AutoCAD, maybe it's just a drafting detail view in Revit. And I just plopped it in and moved it around because I don't need to have all that 3D stuff messing up my working drawings, making my model run slower. Computers weren't as fast 13 years ago. So like if you look through this building, all that furniture is all just stuff on the floor. It looks great on the working drawings, but it's not there in 3D. Let's keep rolling here. So my furniture plans for each level. So there's my exterior elevations. Now you'll see the difference between an aesthetically pleasing exterior elevation that you do for a client or a rendering and a working drawing one is you really don't care that you're uglying it up with like these detail symbols and these section keys and the grids and all these notes, because this is just a tool for the people to build the project off of. What I did do is I have enough hats shown, and this is actually in the Revit model that I have brick there modeled and I have these stone panels modeled, that I can tell the different materials. So like, for example, this is detail 04 or a keynote 04-03. So 0403 is a cast stone panel. So the way this thing rolled is we would type up all the stuff that we knew we had, and then it knew what the keynote was. When we would click on that, it would automatically give us a keynote over there. I don't know if Revit still does this. I don't know if it was Revit or an add-on, but that's how we did it. Now for your projects, just having a little brief note to determine what's going on. You notice roof symbols shown. So in some, and then these are the symbols for my windows and for my window elevations. So the concepts are the same as like the Habitat house, where we had a window symbol on our elevations, right? We had a roof pitch. So then we go down, other elevations. So these are the building sections. So again, you are required to do one section. On a construction document, you have to do sections that show them like where the big details are, where the complex things are. So I've got one at the elevator. I've got one transverse section at the stair showing the firewalls and how the elevator shaft goes in and how it sticks up above the ceiling. And then I've got one longitudinal that catches both of the stairs and the overhangs. So this is the one I want to show you here. So here's my typical wall sections at the curtain wall. And if you look at this, you'll see I've got like bricks shown. And I'm going to show you this in Revit when we get back to the Revit model. All that brick stuff is not in Revit. This insulation stuff is just a detailing element that's shown on top of that section. So you can see I'm doing exactly what I told you. I do a typical exterior wall with everything from in to out, and then I just refer back to that on these other details. So it says SE001. Typical brick masonry exterior veneer wall CA1 of A302. So I only call it out once, and then I always refer them back on my other drawings, because that way, if they decide to change something on that thing, I don't have 20 different times I've called it out that I got to go back and change it all. So I've called it out once here, and every time I've got another one, I call it out back to that document. It would have been super easy for me to copy that note, and it would, I could have had that note everywhere. But then if I would have changed that airspace or the rigid insulation, I had to find every freaking place that I did that all the way through all my project. This way, it's always referring back to that one time. Okay. So then I'm bubbling out my details for like my windowsill. So what I'm going to do when I get back to the Revit model is show you how much of this is Revit. Now you can see there's holes missing for all our structural steel. There should be a structural steel beam there, but I wasn't able to take those models with me when I left. Okay, so there's my typical wall sections. There's more sections at the front entry. So then you have a sheet. Now, again, I don't expect this on a capstone project, but in the real world, you do a sheet for your vertical transportation. So I did my elevator plans and my sections on that sheet. I did my stair plans. So it's the same stair, all 3 levels, and the details related to it there. And then there's the stair sections following after it. And then there's the other stair, because stairs are complicated. You need to make sure that they're designed and built right. And then there's the other stair sections. So here's my bathroom plan. And since I've got a bathroom plan and I've got a lot of space on my sheet, I don't need to make it bigger than a 1/4 inch scale to fill up the sheet. Why don't I go ahead and put my standard ADA details and all my interior elevations that I need to do on that same sheet? Then they don't have to switch back and forth. So, there's a tendency among students to like, oh, I've got to put this on a sheet and it's good. It's the only thing on the sheet. So I'm going to make it at like an inch scale. Well, the reality is a 1/4 inch scale, that's enough space for you to put all your notes. And if you zoom in on that, it's big enough. And then I could get all my related interior elevations on the same sheet, right? So I didn't have to page between sheets. Okay, keep rolling here. So these are all the places that we had cabinetry and casework. So I put it all together on a sheet. So those are all those interior elevations. Okay, so I'm going to show you one of these details again in Revit. So remember on the typical wall section, I was blowing out all these conditions like the bottom of the window and the top of the wall and all that. So this is where all those details show up. And then these are details of like areas where it's important that they get it right. So like when you look at the flashing at the base of the wall, it's important that all those layers are put together right. It's important that all these flashing layers at the windows are put together right. So there's details there, and I'll show you how those were created. So this does not include mechanical, electrical, plumbing, the set that I'm looking at. Here are the details of the various canopies and the outdoor balconies. Here's our built-in gutter and downspout system details. Here's our room finish schedule and our typical wall types. Here's our door schedule. And for whatever reason, the elevations for the frame didn't make the trip when I copied these. But these are like my sections showing how the door frames are mounted in the wall. Again, this is not for the purpose of, oh, your capstone's got to look like this. I just wanted to show you like what a typical small project commercial set. Here's my door schedule, my door frames. Let's go back. And my window types and my window frames, for some reason, they didn't leave the room here. So now what I'm going to do is show you on Revit how much of that drawing is model and how much is a drafting view or detail elements. So we're going to go into Revit here, and I'm going to go to sheet A302, where that typical wall section was. So we're going to go into A302 here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to activate this view. I'm sure you know how to do that. And what I want to do is show you there's this thing called display model. So let's get this so it's bigger on the page here. So what I want you to do is look at all this stuff here and notice what happens when I go to display model and I change it to halftone. And then I hit apply. So you see, some of these things get grayed out. So I'm gonna actually turn off my model. Okay, so on this drawing here, when I turn off my model, all this stuff, the insulation, the spray foam around the steel beam, must be some sort of insulation there. And then my brick pattern and some of my sills, that's all drawn in because you can't get your Revit model perfect on every detail that you cut at every scale. It's just not going to work. So if I turn my model off, you can see a lot of this stuff is just detail lines. Like I did not model all these roof trusses with the truss built exactly right. I didn't have an insulation baffle modeled in Revit in 3D. I didn't have these two plates modeled in Revit in 3D. So I went through and I just cleaned up that drawing there. So let's go back in and apply. So now what I'm going to do is deactivate that view. I'm going to take you over to sheet A501. And I'm going to look at 3 of A501. So that's that windowsill detail. So I'm going to do the same exact thing. I'm going to activate that view. And now watch what happens when I turn the model completely off. Nothing. There's no model on that detail. It's all, so let's see what all this stuff is. So this is, it's a detail item. You know, you can go to Revit and get detail items and drop it down. That's a brick 3-section standard 3/8 inch joint. We just dropped that in there. This is a filled region where it's insulation. This is a rectangle, oh, I'm sorry, this is a spline filled region, which is the spray foam on the inside of our wall. This is a break line. Let's get this one if I can highlight it. That's another filled region where it's gypsum board. These are detail items which are blocking, which you can get off of Revit. We didn't have to draw those from scratch. This is a filled item. This is something we got off the internet from Conier's, CAD library, and we just dropped it into our detail. So all this stuff isn't in the model. All this level of detail is not in the model. It's just detailed lines and elements. Like here, where we're seeing that lines in elevation, those are just thin lines, annotation lines. So I'm going to unactivate, or I'm going to deactivate this view, and I'm going to show you how these details were generated. So if you look at these, let's go ahead and activate this view. That's literally just a detail item, a filled region of concrete. These are just, let me just click on this one here. This is another detail item. There's also something called masking regions, where you can put a masking region and block out the stuff behind it. So if you're trying to layer this stuff over your model and you don't want to see it, you can mask it. But this has none of the model on it. This is just all detail items. This is a filled region. These are just medium lines. This is a filled region. So the idea that you're going to get your Revit model perfect for every view, it just doesn't work that way in the real world. You basically get your sections semi-okay, and then what you need to do on your wall section, you just go in and clean that up, add some items to make them look pretty, block out the items where Revit doesn't come together the way it comes together in the real world. So this is something that never really, I don't think, gets taught to students, but it's really important because there are some places where once they get to this level of detailing for working drawings, they just turn their model off and they just have the standard detail and they just drop it in. But what we did is we kept it live, so it always referred back to the model. But there are some places they'll literally have this detail drawn up somewhere, like an AutoCAD or somewhere, and they'll just bring it in. They won't draw it from scratch for every project. Does that all make sense? Okay. So that's my little glimpse behind the scenes of, you don't have to get your Revit model perfect. You want a nice looking detail or a building section, but you can't achieve that all in Revit. It's just not possible. So don't bother trying to get everything perfect in 3D. Just go in there and clean it up. Do a few details that look really good, and then just clean it up. And if you showed somebody a detail like this now, for a student project, I don't really like this whole idea of the keynotes, but you see what it does. It lets us get a lot of information on the page. So for example, if I look at 0701F, that keynote is 2-inch high density extruded no, it's this one, closed cell spray foam insulation, 1.5 inch unless noted otherwise. So imagine all these notes trying to fit onto these details. And you can see that it would be my set would have gotten twice as many sheets. Okay, so that's why people do these keynote systems. And then if you're a contractor, that keynote stays the same from one drawing to the next because this keynoting system keeps track of all that.